Welcome to another episode of my Wheel of Time reread on Reading the Pattern. We'll be talking about The Eye of the World, chapters 35 through 39, in which we have fun storming the castle in Camelin. I want to take a moment to thank all of my subscribers and to welcome the many new subscribers I have since my last video. That is largely thanks to the awesome Wheel of Time YouTuber Nae'Blis. Very unlikely you don't already know his channel, but just in case, I'm linking in the description box and there's a link on my channel home as well. So definitely check him out if you haven't. I really appreciate the shout out, and it makes an enormous difference in helping people who might like my content actually find it. If you haven't already checked out my previous content in this reread series, I'm linking that for you as well. And now let's get to Camelin.
This video may include spoilers for all Wheel of Time books. If you have not finished reading the series and do not want to be massively spoiled, stop here or proceed at your own risk. While Rand and Mat are in Camelin, Nynaeve, Lan, and Moiraine at first follow the Camelin Road from Whitebridge until they head north to intercept and rescue Perrin and Egwene, and once reunited, continue on toward Camelin, hoping to find their remaining companions. Let's review the notebook of our favorite Ogier to remind ourselves what happened in these chapters. Rand is awed by the size, the crowds, and the beauty of Camelin, but while he is elated to think they will be able to hide there, Mat is overwhelmed and miserable about the number of people.
As Rand and Mat take their leave of Almond Bunt, he confronts them about Rand's sword, revealing he knew they were the ones the innkeeper in the last village had been looking for. But he only gives Rand advice to hide it and then leaves them. Mat is ready to give up, believing that their friends are already dead, but Rand insists on continuing to fight and begins asking directions for the Queen's Blessing, the inn Tom had directed them to.
Rand stops to buy cloth to wrap and disguise his sword, opting for red over white, not yet understanding what each color signifies.
They reach the Queen's Blessing and are greeted by the innkeeper, Basil Gill, who immediately asks for their story when they claim friendship with Tom. Master Gill accepts their story, but he does not believe Tom is dead. He agrees to help them and seems to have genuine affection for Tom, as well as a lot of knowledge about Tom's history, including that he was once court bard in Camelin and lover to the Queen Morgase before she threw him out of the city on threat of prison or death.
While eating a scanty meal, Rand tells Basil Gill a bit more of their story, but without mentioning Shadowspawn.
Master Gill shrugs off Rand's warning that helping them may bring him trouble, and advises them not to seek the help of the Aes Sedai advisor to the Queen, Elida. He also reveals there are a lot of rats in the city. Mat is suspicious of the innkeeper for being willing to help them, and retreats to lie down in their room. Rand seeks a quiet place and is directed to the inn's library, where he meets an astonishing individual named Loyal, who turns out to be an Ogier, a being that Rand had thought existed only in legends. He learns a great deal about Loyal and the Ogier, and ends up telling Loyal his entire story. Loyal explains what it means to be ta'veren, and that he believes Rand, and maybe Mat and Perrin as well, are ta'veren. He immediately decides he wants to travel with Rand, and although Rand doesn't accept the request, he does agree to talk to Loyal more.
Nynaeve waits in the night with the horses while Moiraine and Lan are off scouting.
She recalls their recent journey, tracking the boy who still has his coin, including a brief time when Moiraine was aware that he lost his coin before getting it back.
Lan returns and brings Nynaeve to Moiraine, where they look down on a White Cloak camp.
Lan asks Nynaeve to help free the boy the White Cloaks are holding by cutting the horse lines while Moiraine creates a diversion. Nynaeve doesn't hesitate. Nynaeve manages the task and discovers Bella on the picket line as well, realizing Egwene is also in the camp. Nynaeve frees Bella and another horse and wishes for Moiraine to begin her diversion immediately. Lightning strikes the ground near the horses before coming down in a near continuous wave. Nynaeve manages to get on Bella, hold on to the other horse, and take off into the night.
Perrin lies bound on the ground with Egwene sleeping at his back.
Byar holds Perrin's axe and kicks him awake. Byar offers Perrin a choice, and Perrin realizes that he wants them to attempt to escape so the White Cloaks could justify killing them outright. Byar claims to be driven by the fact that Perrin and Egwene are slowing them down and they need to reach Caemlyn by a certain time. But it's also clear that he just wants them dead and doesn't care how it comes about. As Perrin is about to argue with Byar, he receives a sending in his mind from the wolves that help comes. Lan suddenly appears, knocks out Byar and 2 White Cloak guards, and frees Perrin and Egwene. Lightning starts coming down, and the camp becomes chaos as they make their escape. They make it back to Moiraine, and Nynaeve has not yet returned. Lan is about to go after her, but Moiraine stops him, and Nynaeve makes it back on her own. As the group sneaks away, the wolves say farewell to Perrin in his mind, and promise to meet him again. Egwene insists on knowing where Rand and Mat are, and Moiraine believes they are in Caemlyn, where they will head next. Nynaeve heals Perrin's wounds, and realizes that the irises of his eyes have become yellow. Moiraine knows what this means, but will only speak vaguely about it. Lan also knows, and speaks privately to Perrin, telling him that he knew Elias when Elias was warder, and giving him as much support and reassurance as he can.
Rand wants to go out and see the city and Loghain, but Mat refuses to come with him.
Before Rand heads out, Master Gil warns him that a mad beggar has been asking after him in the city, and that he will be outnumbered in the crowds as a supporter of Queen Morgase. Rand has learned too late that the red wrappings he chose signify support for Queen Morgase, while the white armbands, wraps, etc. are worn by people who believe Morgase and Tar Valon are to blame for all of their problems.
Out in the rowdy crowds, Rand tries to make his way to the inner city, but he is driven off course when he sees the filthy beggar disturbing the crowd.
He ends up at the base of a hilltop wall and decides to climb it to try to get a view of Loghain. At the top, he sees the palace gates, the guards and soldiers, Aes Sedai and warders, and at last Loghain, in a cage, but managing to awe the crowd and appearing undefeated. As Rand wonders aloud about Loghain, a girl's voice suddenly answers him, and he is startled into falling backward and striking his head.
Let's take a look at all the fascinating details and hints of what is to come in Robert Jordan's master plan.
We start to get our first real hints here that Tom Merrilin is not dead. When Mat is convinced that everyone is dead, he says they're as dead as the Gleeman. And he's right, since none of them are dead. But even more so is the fact that Master Gil, who clearly knows and respects Tom, does not believe he's dead, even saying that he's a hard man to kill and that he had managed to escape the guardsmen and the Captain General Garth Bryn when Morgase had ordered his arrest. When Loial meets Rand, he mistakes him for an Aielman, and he won't be the last, another hint of Rand's true parentage. Rand and Loial also laugh over the idea of Rand becoming a king, but he'll do that before too long. There's this very subtle moment when Nynaeve is wishing for Moiraine to begin her diversion. We suddenly get a strong bolt of lightning, and after a brief pause, a stream of lightning bolts. This almost seems like Nynaeve herself might have channeled that first lightning bolt, which triggers Moiraine to come in with the rest. This is very similar to the moments in this book when Rand channels unknowingly, because they both strongly wish for something right before it happens. We also have Nynaeve clearly channeling to heal Perrin in the next chapter, and she's unaware of it, instead giving credit to her herbs. When Perrin ends up wearing one of the children's cloaks in their escape, he thinks it is Byar's, as if he could smell the man on it. This seems to be a hint that Perrin's wolf-enhanced sense of smell is starting to develop.
Later in this chapter is when we first realize that his eyes have changed, and since no one has commented on it before, it's likely that they actually turned during the escape.
We also see 2 instances in this sequence of direct back and forth communication that Perrin has with the wolves. And this is stronger than any sense he's had of them before. So it makes sense that the eye color change would coincide with this direct communication.
We get a hint of Lan's backstory here when Moiraine refers to him as Lord of the Seven Towers and a diademed battle lord of the Malkiri.
Back in Caemlyn, there's this mad beggar who's pursuing Rand, and we don't know who he is, but it later becomes clear that it's Padan Fain again. Then, when Rand is climbing the wall, he has the thought in his head that he's in a sort of competition with Loghain's procession, and that he must reach the top before Loghain reaches the palace. And then when he accomplishes it, he has the thought, I won. I love this because it's like in the competition for who will be the Dragon Reborn, Rand is unaware of this and would not want to win if he did know, but he still ends up the winner.
Let's discuss the central themes and focal points that these chapters are woven around.
In this set of chapters, we start to explore the idea of a web in the pattern and learn more about the concept of ta'veren. In hindsight, at least, it becomes clear that all of these relevant players are being driven towards Caemlyn at the same time. This has really been going on since the beginning, but it's becoming clearer now. It really wasn't a coincidence that Tom Merrilin came to Emond's Field for Beltane. He was able to uniquely provide a specific kind of help to Rand and his friends, and his history would drive him to do that when the circumstances presented themselves.
Listening to Rand's accounting of the events that led him to Caemlyn, Loial immediately senses that Rand, as well as Mat and Perrin, are ta'veren, and he explains that people's lives are threads in the pattern of the ages, which is what they call their history and their reality.
And in the case of the life threads that the wheel has chosen to be ta'veren, those threads force surrounding threads to swirl around them. And the effect continues on outwards, drawing in more and more lives into this web of the pattern. This effect is happening now, and the needs of Rand, Mat, and Perrin are pulling others to them and changing the course of events around them. Loial himself was likely pulled in just this way in order to meet Rand, and this effect is called a web of the pattern. Loial also explains that the pattern generally leaves room for a person to change the course of their life, with some limits. He uses the example that a farmer couldn't just become a king if he wanted to.
With ta'veren, though, the weaving is much tighter, and there is less room to change the course of their lives than most people have.
There are numerous examples in these chapters of this effect at work. Rand, seemingly at random, chooses red to wrap his sword, but it is this choice that gains him help from Master Gil. Chance, too, seems to be involved in leading Rand to a spot where he's able to inadvertently end up in the palace, and where in the next chapter he'll meet a bunch of people that he needs to meet, and the red wrappings again will earn him a measure of trust and allow him to get away freely. In the discussion of Perrin becoming a wolf brother, Moiraine mentions that the pattern might be involved, and when she hints that the Dark One might also be involved, it's only because she's afraid that the Dark One might already be able to influence the pattern. Lan explains directly, sometimes the pattern has a randomness to it, to our eyes at least. But what chance that you should meet a man who could guide you in this thing, and you one who could follow the guiding?
In other words, when Perrin met Elias, it wasn't random chance, but rather Perrin, as a ta'veren, pulling Elias to him because of his need.
He even explains that a web of the pattern is forming and that he believes the boys are central to it. Coming after Loial's declaration, it is clear Lan also means ta'veren. He adds, I don't think there is much choice left in your lives now.
Let's break down the characters and their defining moments in these chapters.
I want to at least briefly touch on most of the major characters who are featured in these chapters, and then focus on a couple of Lan scenes which I just love to pieces. The Rand and Mat dynamic is pretty much the same in these chapters as the last, but Mat continues to worsen. The fact that he's ready to just give up in despair the moment they reach Caemlyn and then refuses to leave their room is concerning. I'm going to question Rand a tiny bit here for not being even more alarmed at this point. Not that there's anything he really could have done, but it does seem like he could have realized just how desperate a situation Mat really was in. Rand does continue to stand out, though, for his absolute refusal to give in to despair. We see this when he talks to Mat and in his conversation with Loial, and in a different way with the stubborn refusal to give up on seeing Logain, even with all the obstacles in his path. With Perrin, I love how we can see his thought process in action when he's trying to work through what Bayar is suggesting to him. And he's not actually that slow thinking when he needs to be quick. He forces himself to stop and think, but he's able to work through it all accurately and in very little time.
On the other hand, he clearly hasn't even begun to think about his connection to the wolves, and his initial reaction seems to be to ignore his instincts, which are there, and which tell him to trust the wolves. He's just nowhere near ready to listen to those instincts yet.
With Nynaeve, we begin to see even more of her bravery and the way she doesn't hesitate for a second to take a chance to help her friends. Whenever she thinks the fear is about to get to her, she uses that to spur herself to take the action she needs to take. Then we see that she's not entirely honest with herself. She is not ready to admit that she's falling for Lan, but I think she knows it deep down.
The moment that Lan grabs her arm and looks her in the eye when he had been afraid she wouldn't return, and then she laughs to herself, that moment is from Perrin's POV, so we don't know exactly what she is thinking, but to me it reads clearly that those feelings are already there.
Then there's Nynaeve and Moiraine, and Nynaeve has not gained any trust for Moiraine over the course of their travels so far. Moiraine, with all her serenity and secretive behavior, manages to get right under Nynaeve's skin. And I'm at least a little more sympathetic to Nynaeve overall. Even though it's clear that Nynaeve's distrust of Moiraine goes too far, I too would probably be very needled by the fact that Moiraine cannot give a straight answer to anything, and her response to Perrin's eyes is the worst yet, hinting that the Dark One could be involved and saying it won't harm him directly, but never coming close to explaining what it actually is.
And it's clear she knows more than she says, but secrets are just second nature to Moiraine.
So I absolutely love this scene between Moiraine and Lan, when he's about to leave her to go look for Nynaeve, and she stops him short and reminds him of his vows and that some things are more important. Just the fact that Lan would consider leaving Moiraine in this moment, and that he hesitates even after she stops him, speaks volumes about his growing feelings for Nynaeve.
Given their bond, Moiraine must be aware of this change in Lan, and we can speculate about how it would affect her.
There must be some pain in it, knowing that Lan's loyalty is being tested in this way. There's no romantic jealousy there, but there's still a loss in it. Knowing Moiraine, if it were just that, I suspect she wouldn't hold him back. But she is absolutely dedicated to protecting Rand, Mat, and Perrin above all else at this point. And she needs Lan, and she will not let him abandon their cause for any personal considerations. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite scenes in this entire book, it's the conversation between Lan and Perrin after everyone realizes Perrin's eyes have changed color. Lan says more here almost than the rest of the book put together, and the fact that he would go out of his way to give Perrin more information than Moiraine will, and to reassure him with lines such as this.
We'll fight the shadow as long as we have breath, and if it overruns us, we'll go on biting and clawing. You Two Rivers folk are too stubborn to surrender. Don't you worry whether the Dark One has stirred in your life. You are back among friends now.
This is huge, and it honestly makes me emotional. Lan's heart has just opened wide for Nynaeve especially, but for all of the Two Rivers folk, and it's amazing.
And now, let's find a little levity amidst the darkness.
I'm not exactly sure why, but I continue to find humor in all the little hints of Nynaeve's and Lan's growing attraction to each other. Maybe it's because Nynaeve refuses to admit it to herself, but still can't help noticing his strong hands. Then there's this little exchange where Lan warns Nynaeve that there are wolves about, but assures her that they usually leave people alone. And Nynaeve claps back sweetly with, "I wouldn't have known that. I only grew up around shepherds." Another line that gets me is Master Gil joking about the strange shapes outside the city, being Trollocs probably, the Shadow Man, Lews Therin Kinslayer himself come back 50 feet high. Since we almost literally have all three in the city right then and there, with the third, and apparently most ridiculous, standing right in front of him. Thank you for continuing on with me in this reread of The Wheel of Time. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss my next video in the series, which will cover The Eye of the World chapters 42-43. Be sure to leave me a comment. Let me know your favorite bits from these chapters. If you're on Twitter, follow me there. And whether or not you're a hasty human, definitely stick around for a lot more Wheel of Time content, including some spoiler-free stuff, and a lot for the Wheel of Time TV series. See you next time, when the web tightens.